Church leaders in Liverpool attempted to offer words of comfort.
I think Liverpool tonight is full of quite incredulous sorrow. They really could not believe that it could happen. When the pictures began to appear on television, I think most people thought it was just a rerun of Heysel and couldn't believe that it was happening before their eyes. There's tremendous sorrow here, and I suppose all one can say is that the family spirit for which Liverpool is renowned is the only thing which can sustain us in times of sorrow of this kind.
But there were only words of bitterness and disbelief from supporters who'd been on the Hillsborough terraces.
2:45, and there was a queue outside, and the police just lost control outside, and they said, right, open the gates, let everyone in. And of course, when everyone went in, they went straight for the open way, where the fans were, right behind the goal. That was the exit, the main exit.
Although there was relief for some, many families on Merseyside will be in mourning tonight.
The Hillsborough disaster again raises the issue of safety at Britain's sports grounds. Over the last 20 years, tragedies at Ibrox in Glasgow, Heysel in Belgium and at Bradford have led to major inquiries into crowd safety. Now that process is due to start all over again. Rob Bonnet reports.
When Rangers equalised Celtic's goal in the Glasgow derby at Ibrox in 1971, part of the capacity crowd surged forward, barriers collapsed, and 200 people were crushed. 66 of them were killed. That and other previous incidents eventually brought about the Safety of Sports Ground Act, introduced in 1975. It required top football and rugby grounds in Britain to ensure a reasonable standard of safety for spectators. They could only operate if granted safety certificates by the relevant county councils. Yet, 10 years later, a discarded match or cigarette thrown onto rubbish under a wooden stand was enough to start the Bradford City fire. It killed 56 people. More would have died if they hadn't been able to escape onto the pitch. At the Heysel Stadium disaster, more would have lived if they had. 39 fans were killed, crushed to death. The immediate cause was the riotous behaviour of some of the Liverpool fans. The underlying reason for the large number of deaths was the unsafe nature of the ground. The Popplewell report followed soon after and addressed itself largely to the safety problems created by the soccer hooligan. One of its principal recommendations was the introduction of a membership card scheme, now going through Parliament in the government's controversial Football Spectators Bill. Ground improvements, largely financed by the Football League Trust, are constantly being undertaken, yet crowd segregation, designed to stop fighting amongst fans and pitch invasions, often means that there's no escape from an overcrowded terrace. Football is struggling with a problem inherited from the 19th century when most of the league's stadia were built. Some facilities are still cramped and inadequate. Police and stewards are often overstretched. This despite the reduction in capacity of many grounds. Good intentions have been expressed all round about crowd safety, yet tonight another inquiry is underway.
I'm joined now from Hillsborough by the Chief Executive of the Football Association, Graham Kelly, who was at the match. Mr. Kelly, police ordered a gate to be opened to relieve the enormous crush outside. Wasn't this just transferring the problem from outside the ground to inside it?
Well, it's a legitimate question, but it's one which you must address to the police. I'm afraid everybody's jumping to conclusions far too quickly. The police had their press conference at 7 p.m. this evening. They're not in a position to answer all the questions yet, and I certainly cannot until all the facts are ascertained in an inquiry.
Are you satisfied that control of tickets was adequate enough to make sure that there weren't any forgeries around?
I've no idea whether there were forgeries or not, but again, I must reiterate, you must wait for the facts to come out in a proper inquiry. You're saying that people got into the ground without tickets. I don't know whether that is substantiated or not. I'm not sure that it is.
Well, there is one Liverpool supporter who said he was amazed to find police officers just waving in supporters without tickets.
Well, I've seen a lot of Liverpool supporters who showed me the counterfoil of the tickets. They hadn't been torn off, which leads one to assume that they were rushed into the ground quickly for whatever reason, but I've yet to have proof that anybody came into the ground without a ticket. That particular end was under capacity as far as we were concerned. The two wing paddocks, there was room in there. We just have to wait and see.
Do you think that crowd-pulling matches like this should be played at grounds like Hillsborough? Should they not be played at bigger grounds, perhaps Wembley?
Well, that is obviously one question which the Football Association will have to address itself to. But you must remember that Hillsborough is a magnificently appointed stadium. It's been staging semi-finals for many, many years now, and it staged them with an impeccable record as far as control of crowds is concerned. Now, we must wait and ascertain what precisely went wrong today before we jump to any conclusions about the staging of semi-finals in the future. That is a long way down the line as far as I'm concerned. As far as I'm concerned, our main feelings tonight, as we see those terrible pictures across the television screens, is for the families of those who've been bereaved. It's a terrible, terrible, devastating day for everybody.
I think we all share your feelings, but at the same time, an inquiry into what happened has already started. The former Sports Minister Dennis Howell tonight criticised the metal fences that stopped fans escaping onto the pitch. Do you share that criticism?
Well, you have to look at the whole situation. The whole situation. All grounds have to have a safety certificate. Some local councils insist upon a perimeter fence, others prefer not to have them. And we in football are in the grounds of the authorities who issue the safety certificates. They determine, in conjunction with the police and the emergency services, what particular arrangements and fences, etc., are best for a particular ground.
Briefly, Mr. Kelly, is there now going to be an urgent re-examination of the whole policing of football matches in this country?
I don't know whether that particular facet is necessary. I'm sure that this will be considered at a time when all the facts of this terrible, terrible case are known.
Mr. Kelly, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And now the rest of the news. Ron?
Yeah, in a part of the ground adjacent to Leppings Lane at the end, and could see just the same as you, people involved in a terrible crush 6 minutes into the game, fans spilling onto the pitch, and the first impression was, oh no, it's Hazel all over again, but of course it wasn't, and people still want to know why what happened.
Peter, is it fair to say that it took quite a while before all the fans right round the ground appreciated the scale of the disaster?
Yes, it did. It took 20 minutes or so, but under the circumstances, the fans kept very, very cool. I think Nottingham Forest fans as well. There was some taunting at first, because the Nottingham Forest supporters, I think, thought that the Liverpool supporters were fighting. As soon as they realised the gravity of the situation, as soon as they saw people being taken away on stretchers, they kept very cool and applauded the ambulance men and applauded the Liverpool fans as well.
Peter Marshall in Hillsborough, thank you very much indeed. And to recap on the main news of the night. 93 people have been killed and 200 injured at this afternoon's FA Cup semi-final match between Liverpool and Nottingham Forest in Sheffield. There are now 2 emergency numbers for those worried about friends or relatives. The first is 0742, a code for Sheffield, 570 800. And there's a Liverpool number 2, that's 051 if you live outside Liverpool, 708 7277. That's Liverpool 708 7277. The disaster happened when too many fans were allowed into one part of the ground, the terracing holding the Liverpool supporters, and hundreds were caught in the crush. The police said they opened a gate into the ground because thousands of fans were massing at the turnstiles. There were many children among the casualties, and emotional scenes as supporters found friends and relatives uninjured. At first, the emergency services were overwhelmed, and supporters used advertising hoardings as makeshift stretchers. Tonight, the first tributes to those who died in Britain's worst sporting disaster have appeared on the deserted terraces at Hillsborough. Earlier, we said the Chief Constable of South Yorkshire gave the order to open the gate at Hillsborough. The police have asked us to point out that it wasn't the Chief Constable himself, but another senior officer. And I'll be back with all the latest details on the Hillsborough tragedy at about 11:20 here on BBC One. Breakfast time will be on the air on BBC One tomorrow morning between 8 o'clock and 5 to 9, and there will be a special edition of Newsnight on BBC Two at 25 to 9 tomorrow, at 25 to 7 tomorrow evening. But for now, good night.
Whether or not they have to be pulled down.
Indeed, not all are big believe in preventing.
Arsenal's Highbury Stadium can accommodate more fans than Hillsborough, but yesterday's tragedy couldn't have happened here because in an emergency it's easy to get onto the pitch. But what all big matches have in common is by hundreds of fans. At Hillsborough, police chose to open the gates to let the latecomers in, rather than insist that the kick-off be delayed for a time of the pitch. But what all big matches have in common is the last-minute rush into the ground by hundreds of fans. At Hillsborough,